Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
This is my third episode covering this year's straight read-through of the Bible, and I kick off each year just reading a different version of the Bible between January and February. And so in the past, I wasn't quite sure what to do with the podcast during that time, and so this year I figured I would just share what I'm learning from the previous week's reading of the Bible. And so I've split up the Bible into 5 different parts this year, and they are the 5 books of Moses plus former prophets. That's kind of volume 1. Volume 2 will be the latter prophets. Volume 3, the writings. Volume 4, the Apocrypha. And then volume 5, the New Testament. And so this past week, I finished volume 1, and I read this version called the Intertextual Tanakh. And I highlighted that a lot in the last 2 episodes, but it's this version that it has a ton of commentary. It has Hebrew on the left, English on the right, and it was just a delight to read through. It actually slowed me down quite a bit, though, because I was so interested in the commentary. I would come up upon a part that I just had questions about or wanted to learn more, and there'd be a little footnote and with just some incredible commentary. So I finished that this past week, and now I'm on to a volume that has no commentary. It doesn't even have chapter or verse references, and that's the Bibliotheca version. So for volume 2 now, I'm in the latter prophets. And what those are kind of 3 big prophets who are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and then 12 what are called the minor prophets. Those are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And so I finished the second one, Jeremiah, this morning, and it's just been great, and I'm starting to catch up. I mentioned last week that I was falling behind just because I was so interested in that commentary that I was I know how many pages I need to get through, which for these 5 volumes of the Bible, it's 2,823 pages. And so if I divide that by the number of days in January and February, I need to be reading 48 pages per day. I was well below that in that first version, but I'm starting to catch up. So right now I'm at 29 pages per day. So to finish with the required 48 pages per day, I need to be reading 66 pages per day. But with Isaiah and Jeremiah, about half of those books are poetry. And so when it's translated, the text is a lot less on each page. It's kind of like when you're reading a poem type thing. So these are going a lot faster, and I'm starting to catch up. And then once I get to the Psalms and Proverbs, that starts to go a little quicker as well. And then with the lack of commentary, I'm just reading the text instead of getting sidetracked in the commentary. So I think I may be able to finish by the end of February. That's what I'm shooting for. This morning I woke up and my girls are out of school because we had this huge ice storm, and so I just sat down for 2 hours straight and read and finished Jeremiah this morning. So I've been getting a little more time to read here this past week as well. So in last week's episode, I covered Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, and about half of Kings. This week, I'll cover that final part of Kings, Isaiah, and then Jeremiah. And kind of the things I cover will come from those 3 books. It's really been a delight. In those 2 hours I was reading this morning, I had my coffee, and I just read 2 hours straight. Like I didn't even get up, and it's been such a joy. And it's one of those things. This is my 5th time reading straight through the Bible, and it just gets better with each reading. And I'm able to make more connections each time, get more of the story. There's still like I'm still writing questions constantly in the margins, and just kind of thinking through things as I'm reading. But this has been such an enjoyable time. I just look forward to the reading of the Bible, and each year it just gets better and better. So if you've never done it, I implore you to try it. It's unlike any other book you'll ever read, and it's a really special thing. I love it. And I love that I love it in the sense of it's so enjoyable to see the the experience get better each and every year. So in last week's episode, I covered like some things that stuck out, and then I talked about kind of overarching ideas or things that I'm tracking. This week, I'm going to flip that to first talk about themes and overarching ideas, and then I will get into some of the more individual things. So what I want to do here first is just talk about these big ideas that I'm thinking about. And each year I read the Bible, it's something different that just kind of naturally my mind goes towards, and then I just track it as I'm reading it. So one big thing I'm thinking about a lot this year is the individual within the overall direction. And so what I mean here is when I'm reading in the book of Kings, and then when I'm getting into the prophets now, like Isaiah and Jeremiah, there's this direction that Israel is heading. There's this direction that the kingdoms of Israel and Judah are heading. And it really starts out, like especially with the kings. After Solomon, Jeroboam takes power in Israel, and then all the kings after him in Israel follow his path. And so they talk about the path of Jeroboam. And no matter what king it is, and if that king, it says he followed the path of Jeroboam. And for Israel, like what's really interesting in the book of Kings, and it'll say this king did right in the eyes of the Lord, and this king did evil. When you put all those together, there was not a single king in Israel who did good. There was a mixed bag in Judah where some of the kings were good and some were bad. But what's interesting in the kingdom of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, is that none of them did good. But when it talks about them, it says they all followed the path of Jeroboam. And when you read about Jeroboam, he set up some golden idols right away and just did some awful stuff. And so everybody followed in that path. And so as I'm reading that, I just keep thinking, what would it have taken to get out of that path? And was that path so strong that it was hard to get out of? And then kind of further to that, were there individuals who did not follow that path within Israel? And what did that look like? And do we hear about them? Do we read about them? And so to some degree, just, being able to read these prophets, the prophets were people that were outside of that path in that they were describing the path. They were trying to get people to repent and get off of that path, to go against the path of Jeroboam. What's also interesting is the contrast. So you've got the path of Jeroboam, which is the wrong path, contrasted with the path of David. And so the kings that were in the path of David, that was a good thing. If you were in the path of Jeroboam, you were going the wrong direction. And so you're reading this, and just this whole section of the Old Testament, you're seeing how these paths for Israel and Judah are leading to exile. The northern kingdom, Israel, is going to be attacked by the Assyrians. The Assyrians are going to take them and remove them from Israel to where there's not a kingdom of Israel anymore. Judah holds on a little longer, but they eventually get attacked by Babylon, and they are exiled as well to Babylon. And some of them return eventually to Judah, but there's this element of you know what's happening with this story, and it's the path that they're choosing is going to lead to this exile. Can an individual do something? Like, how hard is it for one person to go against that prevailing culture? And I just kind of think about this in our terms as well. Like if our culture is going one direction, I mean, look at the scripture, look at how hard it is for just an individual to go against that prevailing culture. Just something that's been sticking out to me. I wanted to read a few different parts. And so here are some things kind of along that idea of the individual. So here we go. Run to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem and see, I pray you, and know, and seek in its broad places if you can find a man, if there is any who does justly, who seeks truth, and I will pardon her. And though they say, as Yahweh lives, surely they swear falsely. O Yahweh, are not your eyes upon truth? and I'll stop reading there, but just that part of, if there is any who does justly, who seeks truth, and I will pardon her. It kind of reminds me of that story from Sodom and Gomorrah where Abraham is asking, what if there's 50 people or 10 people or 5 people who are righteous? And it's like, it's really hard to even find that many. And here, and this is in the book of Jeremiah, there's this question, if there is any who does justly. And so, yeah, just again, that question, is there anyone that I can find that is doing correctly? Here's another part just a few pages later in Jeremiah. For from the least of them, even to the greatest of them, everyone is given to covetousness. And from the prophet, even to the priest, everyone deals falsely. And they heal the hurt of my people slightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. And I'll stop reading there. But again, just this idea, no matter what position the person is, it's hard to find an individual, and that stuck out this time. It's a little scary in thinking about it at that societal level, the cultural level, and then at the individual level. So it's just been something I've been thinking about a lot, especially with the kings, but then also kind of now getting into the prophets and seeing the prophets identify these things and call out to try to get people to turn, and it's hard to find people to even turn. Another theme, I've got kind of 3 overarching themes. So that was the first one. The second one is in the idea of returning, and just to also there on unity. So they're about to get exiled, and so Jeremiah and Isaiah are both talking about, once you've been exiled, what about return? What would returning look like? And further to that, what would unity look like? You've got these different tribes, you've got different people. How could they be united? And each year when I read the scripture, I also have a lot of just what's going on in our society going through my head, and I'm just kind of trying to think how could this apply to our day and age? So one thing I'm thinking about a lot is just even with Christians right now, there's a heavy division amongst Christians. And what would it look like for there to be a return, for there to be unity? Is that even possible? And just kind of reading through the prophets this year, this is where my mind is currently going. What would it be for Christians to be united? What would it mean for there to be a return path? So I'm going to keep following that, but that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, as well as I've been going through the scriptures, and then just all the different scenarios that the people are in through the time of the kingdoms, through exile, just kind of tracking what were things done, what were things done that tried to build unity, what were things that tried to help get people back together. So I'll be reading that. Here's one part just kind of about the hope of that. Here we go. And I will bring them again to this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. And I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever, for the good of them and of their children after them. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will not turn away from following them to do them good. And I will put my fear in their hearts, that they may not depart from me. Yea, I will rejoice over them to do them good, and I will plant them in this land in truth with my whole heart and with my whole soul. And I'll stop reading there, but just I will give them one heart and one way, just this idea of there being a sort of unity within that, but kind of tied to this new covenant, that an everlasting covenant. So that's the second thing I'm tracing. The third thing here is something I came across at the end of Kings and Samuel, but this part I believe was in Kings, and it was this is where David's had the had the problem with Bathsheba. He kills Bathsheba's husband. He commits adultery, and so that's one area where it's like a secret sin was exposed to the entire world, and we're reading about it now. But there's a second thing that David does, and he wants to collect a census, and the commentary note on this was really interesting. So I'm just going to read it. God entices David against Israel to make his internal sin of arrogance manifest to all, just as he had done as punishment for David's secret sin with Bathsheba. This is critical because the message of the punishment is the primary goal. God is not a sadist. God is simply enticing David to make his outward actions match his inner ones. He believes that his strength lies in numbers and not in God, and now that error is going to be clear to all. The punishment for that error and the reason for the punishment will also be clear to all to teach a moral message to all Israel. And I'll stop reading that part there. I just found that fascinating. If you listen to some of the other podcast episodes, I talk a lot about direction and just how our small, I call it small, seemingly insignificant choices, how those lead us in a certain direction in our lives. And I just thought that was so interesting, the wording of God showing kind of an internal thing and exposing it to the world, which is what oftentimes happens with our things that we think we're doing in secret. They get exposed. And God was enticing David to make that inner sin outward. And you see that at a couple different points in David's life, and he's repentant about those things after the fact. But yeah, I just thought about that idea of direction and how maybe God does that in all of our lives, where the things that we think are in secret, they get exposed like this. But all it's doing is just showing the inward and showing it outward. I just thought that was really interesting. Here are just a few ideas and things that have stuck out. Not as much kind of like overarching themes, but just more like individual things that popped out. So I always, when I read the David story and come to the part about Absalom, and then you see David weeping once his son Absalom has been killed, and you're like, this is overkill. This is actually kind of strange. Like he's weeping quite a bit here, and his son was just trying to kill him, and a bunch of people died. Like, what's the deal? And one of the notes, it said David thinks that Absalom is his promised heir, which explains his behavior. And so that helped that part of it make sense. David was told that his line would continue. At that point, he doesn't know that it's going to be Solomon, but in his mind, it's his son Absalom, and Absalom has just been killed. So what does that mean for the promises and all that? So it kind of gave a little better insight into his reaction, which I always thought was a little strange. Another thing, there's a part at the end of, I guess, Samuel, where it talks about another Goliath being killed, but it's the same description, a weaver's beam and that kind of thing. And but it says that someone else killed Goliath, and so I've always been interested in what does that mean, especially in relation to David. Like, did David kill Goliath, or did somebody else? What's going on? And the commentary there, it said, there's no intellectually honest answers about the two Goliaths. And I thought that was kind of funny. So then going on to the latter prophets here, I want to read one thing in Isaiah that I thought was just beautiful. It says, "Drip, O heavens, from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth open, that it may bring forth salvation, and let it cause righteousness to spring up together. I, Yahweh, have created it." Some beautiful parts and beautiful language in there. Another part that I want to read, and just really quickly, the version that I'm reading with this Bibliotheca, it's called the American Edition, and it's the newly edited version from 2016. The thing I like about it is it's the closest one that I've read that reminds me of the King James version without being the thous and all that. So I love it, and it's just kind of like enough of a difference from other versions of the Bible that I read where parts of it will stick out, and I really enjoy that. There is another part here. I think about memory a lot, and I think I either wrote about it or shared it in a podcast recently. But just this questioning of will we have our memory in heaven? Like the books I'm reading right now, will I remember them in heaven, or will I have my memory of things that happened here? And I asked that question on X, and I got a lot of neat responses. But here's one verse that says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered, nor come to mind." End quote. So, putting that in the toolbox of as I'm thinking through those things. There's a great part in Jeremiah that reminds me of Psalm 1. And so I want to read this part in Jeremiah, and then I'm going to read Psalm 1 so you can see the connections. "Blessed is the man who trusts in Yahweh, and whose trust Yahweh is. For he shall be as a tree planted by the waters, that spreads out its roots by the river, and shall not fear when heat comes, but its leaf shall be green, and shall not be anxious in the year of drought, nor shall cease from yielding fruit." End quote. I love that. I love this idea that trees planted by water are not anxious. They're continually by the source, and there's so much like anxiety that people suffer from right now, and just it's almost like the cure for that anxiety of being next to the proper source. And that reminds me a lot of Psalm 1, where it says like this: "But the law of Yahweh is his delight, and on his law he meditates day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the streams of water, which brings forth its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and all that he does shall prosper." I'll stop reading there. The last thing I want to talk about is a part in Jeremiah that reminded me of Deuteronomy 30. So in last week's episode, I mentioned how much I loved Deuteronomy 30, how there's this choice presented between life and death, and how we get to make that choice. And there's a part in Jeremiah, and again, the version I'm reading does not have chapter or verse references, so I can't tell you what part of Jeremiah, but here's, let me just read this. "And to this people shall you say, Thus says Yahweh, Behold, I set before you the way of life and the way of death. He who abides in this city shall die by the sword and by the famine and by the pestilence. But he who goes out and passes over to the Chaldeans who besiege you, he shall live, and his life shall be to him for a prey. For I have set my face upon this city for evil and not for good, says Yahweh. It shall be given into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall burn it with fire." End quote. I just think it's so interesting because in this case, there's a choice between life and death. And it's also spoken about in Jeremiah between the good figs and the bad figs. In life, in this case, you would, in my mind, I would think it would be the opposite. I would think, oh, this is Jerusalem. Jerusalem's being attacked by the Babylons. But life, I think, wouldn't you want to stay in Jerusalem? If I go with the Babylonians, I'll be exiled, and then won't they just do terrible things? Wouldn't life be in Jerusalem? But in this case, the choice is set before them, life and death. And life actually means you going with the Babylonians into exile. Death actually means staying in Jerusalem. And that's the choice put before them at that point. And with that, the good figs are actually the ones that go into exile with the Babylonians. The bad figs are the ones that would try to stay in Jerusalem. And I just thought that was interesting. And then just tying that together with the choice in Deuteronomy 30 was something that was neat. So those were the things that stuck out in this past week's reading. This upcoming week, I'll likely finish the latter prophets and then start getting into the writings. The writings then are going to be things like Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. The book of Ruth is in there, and it closes with Chronicles. After that, the Apocrypha, and then the New Testament after that. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you if anything stuck out to you, or you had a question, or you wanted to share something maybe that you've gotten out of similar parts of the Bible. I would love to hear that. You can email me at at booksoftitans.com, or just comment on the Substack portion of this podcast episode. That's where I post the podcast, and there's a section where anyone can leave a comment. So I would love that. Then other people can see that and comment, and we can get a nice discussion going there. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter. It's just at Books of Titans, or check out the website, Books of Titans. We've got a number of different options there, reading all my reading lists and reviews and all sorts of things. So be sure to check that out. I'll be back next week. I'll be covering the next part of the Bible reading progress for update number 4. And until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.